I discovered that my wife was having an affair in the most unexpected and distressing way possible. It all began when the police reached out to me with inquiries about her partner. At that moment, I was completely overwhelmed and unsure of my next steps. My mind was in turmoil, and I questioned whether this was the appropriate place to share my story, or even if I should be posting it at all. In this state of confusion, I found myself seeking guidance and direction. My wife and I had been married for 12 wonderful years, sharing an incredible bond and raising our son together for 11 of those years. Up until the night I received that shocking call, I believed our marriage was strong and happy. I genuinely thought I was a good husband, always treating her with love and respect. We never faced financial hardships, and our intimate life was fulfilling. I never took her presence or our relationship for granted. Each morning, I woke up with gratitude, thanking God that she was my wife. However, everything changed abruptly. Yesterday, as I was finishing up work, I received a call from the local police department. They urgently requested that I come to the station as soon as possible. My heart raced with panic. I immediately wondered if something terrible had happened to my wife or our son. The officers tried to reassure me, telling me not to worry, but the urgency in their voices made me uneasy. When I arrived at the station, they seated me in a room furnished with a table and several chairs. They began by asking for my name, which I provided without hesitation. Then, the questioning took a bewildering turn. The officers started inquiring about a man my wife worked with, someone I hadn't seen or spoken to since our company's Christmas party in December 2019. They pressed me with questions like how long I knew this individual and how I became aware of him. My only response was confusion. What are you talking about? After about an hour of relentless questioning, I reached a breaking point. I stopped responding to their inquiries and instead turned my attention to my family, desperately asking about the whereabouts and safety of my wife and son. The officers seemed to be going in circles, repeating the same questions over and over. This went on for roughly 2 hours, with frequent breaks where they would leave the room for 15 to 20 minutes before returning to start the interrogation anew, much like a scene from a poorly scripted police drama. Finally, the last officer handed me a tablet displaying a video of my wife and her co-worker engaging in intimate relations. The image was jarring, and I struggled to process what I was seeing. My memory from that point is hazy, but I vividly recall screaming in disbelief, unable to comprehend the reality of the situation. Overwhelmed by emotions, I experienced a full-blown panic attack right there in the middle of the police station. The officers called a paramedic to assess my condition, and he recorded my blood pressure at a dangerously high 170/110. Despite his recommendation to go to the hospital, I refused, determined to find my wife and son. Once I regained some composure, the officers explained that the man in the video had been involved in an affair with my wife, along with several other women. Earlier that morning, they had found him in a critical state, beaten, raped, and set on fire in his driveway. While he was still alive, his condition was dire, and his survival was uncertain. The police had obtained permission from my wife to access his phone and computer, where they discovered the incriminating video. They questioned me about my whereabouts that morning, and I informed them that I had been at the gym and then at work, approximately 10 minutes away from the gym. At this juncture, the officers suggested that I might want to consider not staying at home, as they suspected that my wife's affair could have been a motive for the attack on her lover. They also revealed that my wife wasn't the only person the man had been involved with. Panicked and fearing for my family's safety, I hurried home. Our son was staying with our neighbors, so I retrieved him, packed some clothes and his laptop for school, and took my gun. We then drove to my parents' house, which was about 4 to 5 minutes away. Despite these efforts, I still hadn't heard from my wife. Her phone was constantly going to voicemail, adding to my anxiety. I reached out to the officer, who had initially contacted me, and he informed me that my wife was at the hospital with the man she had been cheating with. Now, I found myself sitting in bed with my son on one side and my 38-year-old father on the other. My dad was resting in his chair in the living room, a shotgun resting across his lap, a stark reminder of the severity of the situation. Exhaustion overcame me. I hadn't slept in over 30 hours. I was at a loss for where to begin, feeling utterly helpless. Any form of assistance or advice would be invaluable at this moment, as I was enveloped in a state of emotional fog. Later, I received an update after speaking with my in-laws. My wife had checked herself into a psychiatric ward. This revelation left me even more devastated and confused. I reiterated that I had just discovered my 36-year-old wife of 12 years was having an affair, a fact I learned directly from the police during their questioning related to the assault of her lover. I attempted to share this story on Saturday at 12:19 p.m., but my post didn't go through, and I was subsequently blocked from reposting after asking a yes or no question. Frustrated but determined, I decided to share it again here. As I'm balancing work, my ability to respond promptly is limited, and my original post was removed. However, many people reached out to me, seeking updates. I felt compelled to update everyone on the developments over the past week, as the support and responses I received were instrumental in helping me navigate this crisis. I owe a deep debt of gratitude to this community for aiding me in regaining clarity and directing me toward the necessary steps to handle the situation swiftly. For those who doubted the authenticity of my story, I wish from the depths of my heart that it were true. Sometimes, reality is stranger than fiction. Regarding the inability of some to find a new narrative, it's important to note that due to the nature of the attack, much information was withheld from the public. Even our local news outlets only reported it as an assault, providing nothing more substantial than a brief mention during our nightly news segments. To those who questioned the police's actions, believing they wouldn't behave in such a manner, I must correct you, the officers did exactly that. My lawyer later informed me that the police have the authority to act or speak as they please, especially if you're not under arrest, including lying directly to you. It turns out my wife wasn't at the hospital with her lover when I first contacted the detective. She had been admitted to the psychiatric facility earlier that day while he was still in surgery. I still don't understand why they lied about that, but they did. This entire ordeal has made me highly suspicious of law enforcement. After waking up that afternoon, I reached out to my uncle's law partner, who is also a family friend. He came to my parents' house and sat down with me to discuss my options. His entire law firm took on my case, handling both the divorce and criminal defense aspects. On Sunday, he secured an emergency custody order and a protective order against my wife to protect me, our son, and my parents. Our court date is scheduled in 60 days. On Monday, the police served my wife with these orders as she was leaving the psychiatric hospital, according to her brother, who is a close personal friend. She did not react well to this news and is currently staying with her parents. Neither of us has communicated since then. She hasn't made any attempts to reach out, whether due to shame, indifference, or the protective order. Regardless, I'm relieved because it's clear that my wife is not the person I once thought she was. I regret not recognizing the truth sooner. I had to explain the situation to my son in a manner appropriate for his age. When I did, his immediate response was, "Please don't let mommy take me away." I inquired why he felt that way, and he revealed that my wife had been treating him poorly when I wasn't around. She had told him that if he ever spoke to me about her behavior, she would take him away, and he would never see me again. It became evident that she had been emotionally tormenting our son, and I had been oblivious to it. This revelation was more devastating to me than the video of her affair. I shared this information with my lawyer, who used my son's statements and my wife's unstable mental condition to secure the emergency custody order. I also reached out to his school to arrange for therapy resources, and he will begin therapy after the new year. I can't help but feel like the worst father imaginable, grappling with feelings of inadequacy and guilt. Regarding our families, her parents contacted me on Tuesday, requesting to visit us. At that time, I was still staying with my parents, and I informed her parents that they were welcome to come, but her presence near us was not allowed. They agreed, appearing genuinely remorseful. Her mother was inconsolable, crying throughout their visit, and her father was visibly heartbroken, often referring to my wife as that girl. They both expressed that they sensed something was wrong with her and insisted that they had never raised her to behave in such a manner. We embraced and cried together before they left, and I assured them that they would always remain a part of our lives, regardless of the outcome of the divorce. Based on what my son shared, their visit was the most emotionally challenging part of this entire ordeal. My lawyers have been exceptional in their efforts. They've uncovered that the man my wife was involved with has an extensive criminal history. One of the lawyers discovered that when they attempted to print out his arrest records, the printer malfunctioned for 5 minutes straight. From what they've learned, he is currently on parole for several offenses, and has had past affiliations with gangs. Although he is still alive, his condition remains critical, and his survival is uncertain. The law firm has an investigator, who reached out to a co-worker, who had driven my wife to the hospital. This co-worker revealed that my wife's affair was an open secret within the office. My lawyers believe this is how the police identified both me and my wife in the video. There are numerous photos from last year's Christmas party at her workplace, and both my wife and I appear in several of them. This is the current state of affairs, and I remain numb, feeling lost and heartbroken. I wonder how long this numbness will last and if there's a way to overcome this emotional exhaustion more quickly. It all feels surreal, as if I'm witnessing someone else's life unfolding. In an update, I find myself even more lost after learning that my 42-year-old wife, who is 36 years old and has been my partner for 12 years, was having an affair. The police contacted me for questioning related to the assault of her lover. I want to start by expressing my gratitude to everyone who responded to both my original post and my update. This community has been a tremendous support. If I haven't been able to respond to you individually, I apologize, as the volume of messages has been overwhelming. Firstly, my son is showing significant improvement. He began therapy in the first week of January, and the positive changes are already noticeable. I asked him if he felt comfortable with me discussing his sessions with his therapist, and he agreed. As a result, I've had several conversations with her. According to the therapist, my ex-wife had been verbally and emotionally abusing our son whenever they were alone together. She prohibited him from making any noise or bothering her in any way. When he was at home, she would leave him alone for hours, sometimes even overnight if I was out of town. She also threatened to take him away permanently if he ever spoke to me or anyone else about her behavior. The therapist explained that this has left him feeling powerless and dependent at a crucial time in his development, when he should be feeling empowered and self-reliant. To address this, I've provided him with his own phone and helped him memorize the phone numbers and addresses of family members and other relevant contacts. I've also been teaching him situational awareness, how to pay attention to street names and red addresses on buildings. We've even practiced role-playing scenarios where he can ask strangers for help and clearly explain that he's in trouble and doesn't feel safe. While this may seem trivial, my son is somewhat introverted and shy when he's uncomfortable. Even though we've only been doing this for a few weeks, I can already see his confidence growing. Any additional suggestions on how to further build his self-reliance would be greatly appreciated, as his safety and well-being remain my top priorities. As for myself, I'm managing as well as can be expected under the circumstances. I started therapy around the same time as my son, and although I don't speak with my therapist as frequently as he does, it has been beneficial to talk through my thoughts and feelings about everything that's happened to our family. The initial numbness has dissipated, replaced by a searing anger that burns in the pit of my stomach every time I think about my ex-wife and the turmoil she's caused our family. Strangely enough, while I despise feeling angry, it's much easier to handle than the numbness was. My therapist explains that this is part of the grieving process. It's not just about how we feel, but how we channel those emotions that truly matters. Regarding my legal situation, it remains the most frightening ordeal I've ever faced. I was granted temporary full custody of my son and ordered to pay child support, which I didn't want, but my lawyer insisted that we request it. Additionally, a protective order was issued for me and my son. Neither my wife nor her lawyer attended the order hearing. During the hearing, the judge asked if we would allow supervised visitation, but my son refused entirely, which is why my lawyer advised me to bring him along. The judge then asked my son if he would be willing to speak privately with him, and he agreed. The judge, a stenographer, and a child welfare officer met with my son in chambers for about 10 minutes. After their meeting, the judge approved the temporary orders and mandated therapy and a psychological evaluation for my son. Fortunately, the therapist he is currently seeing is somehow connected with the court, so he doesn't need to see another therapist. My lawyer mentioned that this is beneficial, because it means his therapist can provide a custody recommendation directly to the court. However, it still terrifies me that my ex-wife could potentially gain some form of custody after everything she has subjected our son to. As for the assaulted partner, I still don't know much. From what my lawyers have discovered, he is alive but remains hospitalized. I haven't heard anything new from the police since my initial interview, so there's no update on that front. Regarding my ex-wife, I haven't seen her since the day I was questioned by the police until last Thursday. She has tried calling me a few times, but I haven't answered. When she called from a different number, I immediately hung up. I have nothing left to say to her and don't want to hear anything she has to say to me. Her lawyer requested a preliminary hearing for our court-appointed mediation, and she was served with this notice during the second week of January. She attended the meeting with her lawyer, and although she always appeared attractive and athletic, even looking like a supermodel in our wedding photos, she looked disheveled and frail during the meeting, especially while wearing a mask. She didn't make any eye contact with me and spent most of the time with her face down. The meeting was long and exhausting, but ultimately, it was worth it for the significant revelation that followed. We presented her lawyer with a question about how to handle the discovery process for dividing our assets. My lawyer responded with a shocked look, asking, "What division of assets?" He reminded them of the prenuptial agreement we had in place. The expression on her lawyer's face was priceless. She hadn't informed her lawyer about the prenup. My late uncle, who was the founding partner of the law firm representing me, had drafted the prenup and even hired her lawyer to review it before our marriage. According to my lawyer, it is an exceptionally fair agreement that will be nearly impossible to break. The prenup meticulously details that all marital assets and debts are to be divided equally, with ownership of intangible assets and personal debts reverting back to the individual who accrued them. Additionally, the adultery clause states that if either party is found to have committed adultery, they forfeit any right to claim spousal support. Her lawyer's final request was particularly troubling. She asked to postpone the official mediation for 6 months, so that my ex-wife could attend a rehabilitation facility for substance abuse. Some people in both my original post and my update had suggested that she might have issues with substance abuse, but I hadn't considered it, because I couldn't fathom such a situation. I consulted with my lawyer, who advised that we would discuss it and respond accordingly. Before we could finalize our decision, my ex-wife spoke to me for the first time, requesting that I read a letter she had written. My lawyer cautioned me that this could be a deceptive move, so I approached it with skepticism. However, I decided to read the letter, and now I regret that decision. The letter began with cliched phrases about being a cheater and expressing love for me and our family. She admitted to mistreating our son and expressed self-hatred for her actions. She stated that she wanted our family back, but then delved into an explanation of how, after a major surgery 2 years ago, she began abusing her medication. Eventually, she started obtaining drugs from some of her colleagues, including the man she was involved with. When she ran out of money, she resorted to sleeping with him to make ends meet. She confessed that she hid this behavior from me out of fear that I would intervene and stop her. She couldn't function properly without the drugs anymore, and insisted that the man meant nothing to her except as a means to obtain a fix. She expressed deep remorse for the pain she had caused both herself and our family. She acknowledged the gravity of her actions and expressed a desire to improve for the sake of our family, pleading for time to prove her commitment to change. I want to make it clear that I will never reconcile with my wife. Our marriage effectively ended the moment she cheated on me and mistreated our son. I find myself questioning my own actions during all of this, feeling like the most naive and foolish person alive. I'm torn between wondering if I should simply discard her or if, despite feeling betrayed, I still have some justification in feeling the way I do. I feel like a failure as both a husband and a father, grappling with nothing but anger and resentment toward her. However, I also struggle with whether this is the right way to treat someone who is battling their demons. I understand from the comments here that not showing compassion isn't the same as being vindictive. I need to internalize that letting her face her struggles isn't the same as kicking her when she's down. She has put me in an impossible situation where I can't risk my son's well-being to help her further. She must address her issues on her own. Despite this, I am still moving forward with the divorce process. I am considering reaching out to her treatment facility to offer support from a distance, recognizing her as a fellow human being and acknowledging the love we once shared. However, my son's well-being remains my top priority. My lawyer was prepared to celebrate when I read her letter because it provided a clear-cut admission of untreated addiction, which virtually guarantees that I will retain full custody of our son. In summary, This past week has been an emotional rollercoaster, filled with shocking revelations, legal battles, and profound personal loss. I am striving to navigate this tumultuous period with the support of my family, legal counsel, and this compassionate community. My focus remains steadfast on ensuring the safety and well-being of my son while finding a way to heal from the heartbreak and betrayal that have upended our lives.